Hello, welcome to another Blue Black podcast. My name's Ezekiel Malcolm and this is Kayden and Ezekiel. Today we have a very special guest, Mr Burtt. I'm sure most of you watching would have seen Mr Burtt around the school, very public figure. He's going to talk about school, his time in school. You were an old boy, is that right, sir?
That's correct.
Yep.
Yes.
Do you want to talk about what school was like when you were in school, changes in culture
Well,
and
I can
whatnot?
talk about my time at school, which was between 1968 and 1972. My older brother had been the senior monitor in 1962, and so it was a bit easier for me to get in, the fact that he had been a pupil at the school. So it meant that automatically, pretty well, any brothers would be invited in. We had to apply. We were out of zone. I can't remember if we actually had zones then, because boys came from all over Christchurch. We lived on the border of Addington, Sydenham, Straven area, which is down off Selwyn Street. And so I arrived here in 1968. My first memory is we were wearing caps, and the thing about wearing caps in those days was that as you came in as a first year pupil, the year 10s, which were fourth formers in those days, would attack you and try and denob your cap.
They'd try and take your cap.
No, there's a little knob on the top.
Oh, right.
You know, where all the pieces come together.
Oh, okay.
And so the idea was, let's get into these little guys and rip their knobs off, as it were.
Of course, yeah. Yeah, as is custom.
I don't know if that was that funny. They ripped the knobs off. And the interesting thing was, within 2 or 3 years, while I was at school, caps went out. So up until that point, round about 1970, caps were worn by students.
Do you think they were taken away because people would go out of the way to rip other people's knobs off?
Yes, I think so. I think that because it caused a few issues in terms of the senior management of the school,
right.
Therefore they thought it was not necessarily a good idea. The other thing that happened at school when I was in my last year at school, 1972, the blazer, which you're wearing now, used to be for just sports teams.
Right,
okay, that's why it's called the school blazer. And you got a blazer award if you represented, say, the hockey team or the first 15. And so those blazers were only worn by the sportsmen on days when they're playing inter schools. So against Christ College, against Wellington College in those days for hockey. So that's the only time they were worn. The senior monitor in my last year at school, Brent Stanaway, did a lot of work along with 1 or 2 other guys, and were able to get the sportsmen to wear those blazers, because we had 2 uniforms. One was with the sports blazer and one was wearing a suit. So we wore a suit coat as well. So we basically had to buy 2 things. So by allowing people who were in the sports teams to wear the sports blazer to school saved us quite a bit of money. Later on, of course, it became, and I can't remember exactly when, that blazer became available to all senior students.
So what would the senior students wear alternatively of a blazer if they weren't wearing blazers?
They were wearing a suit, which was just a grey suit, if you can imagine.
Oh, yeah, I think I've seen photos of that.
So a lot of the seniors would be wearing that. So, you know, there's been improvements. It's a very smart blazer that we have. And you can have a pocket where you can show what you've represented. And also, around about 20 years ago, we brought in the scholars. So it wasn't just for sport.
Yep.
So it's now we have the scholar awards as well.
Cool.
Did you play sport in your time at school, Mr Burtt?
Yes, I did. I played a lot of sport. Our family has got a very proud tradition in hockey and cricket. My older brother played cricket for Canterbury. I have my father and my uncle played cricket and hockey for Canterbury and the South Island. My uncle Tom, my father's younger brother, was on the 1949 cricket tour to England, and he basically bowled at one end while the fast bowlers bowled at the other. He was a left-arm spinner and took 128 wickets on that tour.
Wow.
My father's best friend was Walter Hadley. My father just missed that tour because he was in the final trial. So cricket and hockey, my uncle also played hockey for New Zealand. And he and Mr Thompson, who was our careers advisor up to about 5 or 6 years ago, they are the only two New Zealanders who have played official tests in both cricket and hockey. I myself played in the first 11 hockey when I was in the fourth form, so year 10. In fact, we had just won the Rankin Cup, which is the top trophy for secondary school hockey 7 years in a row. I came in and we lost it that year, unfortunately. But we did play New Zealand that year. The New Zealand team went on a tour to Australia, and so as a fourth former, I played against the New Zealand national team out in front of the shrine, which was where the hockey field was. And we played 3 20-minute spells because they needed a practice game. They couldn't get any other teams to play them. We were the top school in New Zealand, so we played them after 20 minutes. It was 0-0.
Right.
After 3 20-minute spells, it was 4-0. But we were able to compete pretty well with them, which was pretty amazing, really. I don't think on AstroTurf it's a lot faster, so it would be a bit more difficult these days.
Did you have any leadership roles for students on offer when you were in school?
Yes, well, the thing about the school relied on, the staff did not do duty. So it was the monitors had a lot more responsibility in terms of controlling the students during lunchtime and intervals. And we even, when staff members were late to class, we would have to look after a class. So we were given 3 or 4 classes to look after at the end of interval and lunchtime, and if the teacher didn't turn up, some of them didn't turn up to halfway through.
Why would that be? Why wouldn't they turn up?
I don't know. I think they were either drinking in I shouldn't say that, drinking in the staff room. But some of them, in those days, we didn't have as many senior managers.
Right.
So the people did not have the time to do dean's work, and we only had a headmaster and an assistant headmaster. So we only had 2 people at the top, basically, whereas now there's about 6 or 7. So the responsibilities were put on the students. Some of them were heavily involved in sport, like captain of cricket, captain of rugby, captain of whatever. And so those people had a lot of responsibility, but the monitors had a lot more responsibility given to them. And I think it's a shame that we've moved away from that a bit, but there's rules and regulations that say that teachers need to be supervising rather than boys.
Right.
But it did give you a lot of responsibility, and I think as a learning experience, it was extremely good. And I think I have a feeling that the senior management team want to bring back a bit more responsibility with you guys. So hopefully that continues, because I think it's an important part in building leaders. You know, some of the people who have been in positions of like senior monitor, deputy senior monitor, or even monitors have big leadership roles in business and farming and you name it. So it's a great way to educate people on leadership.
What did you go on to do after leaving Boys High?
I went to Canterbury University. I was I was heavily involved in sport. So when I was 20 odd, I was in the New Zealand under-20 cricket team and the New Zealand under-21 Colts hockey team. While I was at university doing a degree in plant physiology. So I did an honours degree in plant physiology. It took 4 years. Then I went to Teachers College for a year, and then luckily I got a job at Boys High for a fixed term because one of the biology teachers, a guy called John Whitehead, went to have a wee go at screen printing T-shirts with his brother, and he ended up carrying on in that job, and so that let me in as a biology teacher.
Right.
So that year, in 1978, I got selected in the New Zealand hockey team. So there was Barry Meister, who was also a teacher at school, and myself. November that year, we went to a tour to Pakistan and played a tournament in Lahore, which was called the first, well, it was the first Champions Trophy, where you get the top teams in the world. Yep. New Zealand had won the gold medal in 1976 with 4 old boys in that team. Wow. I was kind of on the fringe of that. I was a bit younger than those guys, and so it was quite hard to get into the team at that stage. Right. So we went to Pakistan, and that's where I learnt that I had a full-time job at Boys High, because they had made a decision on who was going to take the job.
Hmm. So when you became a biology teacher, is that what you wanted to do in Boys High? Was that a set subject that you knew you wanted to continue teaching?
Yeah, but some of the sciences, particularly chemistry, I found a bit difficult at school, but I got better and better. And it was kind of like it was always a challenge, when you're not quite there. Like I think I got 48 in chemistry at school cert, but at bursary I passed it. So I was getting better all the time, and I think that's one thing that I think young people can learn, that you should challenge yourself to do something better. Don't give up on it. Give it a good go, and if there's always fallback places that you can move back to or move around. But I think challenging yourself to do better is quite important. We used to produce probably a lot more doctors than we do these days. I think younger people look at their futures and see that you've got to work really hard to become a doctor or a specialist of some sort.
Do you think that's true?
I think it's true in that the boys look at it that way. I think boys are taking what I sometimes take easier options.
Yeah.
They don't push themselves hard enough, because those jobs, like doctors and teachers and lawyers, are vital to the community, absolutely important to the society. And Boys High has a really good record of those sort of people. Yeah. I think it's a bit easier these days to look at that and not being the lifestyle that you want, because you have to work hard. You have to give up time. Imagine the doctors at the moment with COVID. They are spending hours and hours, and they're getting tired. But people see that and say, "I don't want to be a doctor," and they see us teachers sometimes, and they see what we have to put up with in the classroom, and also. So they say, well, that's a job I don't want to do. But it's actually vitally important for society, and we're having trouble finding people to do these jobs now. Just about every job there is, we've got a shortage. And COVID's really shown it up, because we're lacking nurses, we're lacking doctors, we're lacking teachers, we're lacking whatever.
Why do you think that is? We're in a lack of doctors.
Well, partly because we've gone to a globalisation. Yeah. So everyone's in the labour force, so we can easily get teachers from England who want to come out, but we're equally, they take our teachers as well. So it's a big workforce, global workforce, which everyone's competing for. And because of travel issues with COVID, we haven't been able to bring them in. It's like farmers not being able to bring in orchardists, not being able to bring in the Pacific workers to help them harvest and prune and do all those jobs that are associated with agriculture and horticulture.
Cool. Yeah, definitely. You've sort of been at Boys High and around Boys High and working at Boys High for so long. What are the main changes you've noticed in Boys High with the students, the values, the school itself?
Yeah, well, I think one of the things that I felt when I was at school at Boys High in the late 60s, early 70s, is that the word service was quite a big thing, service to others.
Yeah.
And my uncle, who was at Boys High in the old site in around about 1920, he always used to say the best jobs are those where you serve others. They're very satisfying jobs. They can be frustrating, but they're really satisfying jobs.
Yeah.
And so I thought that, and after World War II, New Zealand came together. We were one of the wealthiest countries in the 1950s, or either one or two in the world in terms of wealth. A lot of people don't realise that. We're down now at about 30 odd, I suppose.
Wow.
So we're not high in the OECD. But people were out there to serve others. And I think it's got a little bit more selfish now, in that people are thinking about not what I can do for the country, what can I do for myself?
Yeah.
Okay, but when you're doing that, you actually tend to give up more easily. If you're doing things for other people, they are relying on you. You have to front up. But if you are focusing more on yourself, you don't have to front up. You can say, "Oh, that's a bit tough. I'm going to give it up." So I think that's the message I have seen over the years. The boys who come in are basically the same. The boys that come into Boys High are keen and eager and lively, and they want to rip into things.
Yeah.
But over time, they probably lose that, and you can easily blame the school for that, the teachers or whatever. I don't think some of the assessment changes, NCA, has been
they're
good,
changing soon, eh?
and they're changing again,
Yeah.
they'll be changing
because
again.
they've had problems, because people are not pushing themselves to do the more difficult things like externals. If you go back in time, we were doing mainly external. School cert was external, so that's 20 years ago. And now we've got internals and externals. The only ones where you can really compare are externals, because the whole of New Zealand's doing something they haven't seen. So I think the system is not motivating, because all the credits you get are at achieve level, right?
Yeah.
They're at achieve level. You don't get any extra credits for getting merits. You do get endorsements, but the key thing is that people are counting credits. So a lot of the people who sit in the middle that we should be challenging to really go for merits and excellences, they don't necessarily do. They're only counting credits to get their 80 credits to get level 1 kind of thing.
Right.
Whereas if you had bonus credits, I'd change the system a bit if I was in charge.
Wouldn't we all?
Eh?
I said, wouldn't we all?
Yeah. But can you see how it's setting a lower level?
Yeah.
Yeah.
And achieved is actually not a high level.
No, it's not. It's mediocrity.
It's not like the old days where you did one exam and you had to get 50% in the whole exam. And so that sort of motivated you. Also, if you got 49 one year, you know exactly where you are relative to other people. You're only one off passing, right?
Yeah.
And that's a motivating force. But getting not achieved, does that tell you exactly where you are?
No.
Probably not. Sorry, I'm raving on here.
No,
That's
that's
right.
Just looking at some of the differences between then and now, we had a very small choice of courses. So basically you had biology, physics, chemistry, you had geography, history, you had English, you had maths, there's a bit of art, then there was some technical, but not nowhere near the courses that they've got now. Like you'd have woodwork, basically.
Yeah.
Phys ed wasn't assessed in the senior school as a subject, so the number of subjects has increased quite a bit.
So what do you think about that? Do you?
Well, we used to sell the school as quite an academic sort of school.
Yeah.
And people outside saw it like that. We were good at sport. I think as a sportsman, I kind of like the focus then was, because it wasn't professional sport then, people did it for the right reasons. They weren't doing it for money, trying to make money or whatever. Whereas now, I think the balance between the sporty part and the academic part has shifted a bit too much to the kids wanting to come here. So you're looking at who you're going to attract to the school.
Yeah.
A lot of them come for sport, and that's good, because sport teaches a lot. You know, you don't measure it on a report or anything like that, but you measure it because the way in which, you know, how you go in competitions and things like that.
Yeah. Well, when I was coming into school, I don't think the sport was advertised to me as much as anything else. I just saw it as a school that produced successful men. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
So
yeah, that's good.
Yeah. So we have talked about the academia of the school quite a lot now. Why don't we shift away from that and start to talk about your fondest moments of teaching in this school? I'm sure you've got plenty.
Oh yeah. Well, I've taught and coached a lot of New Zealand, you know, cricketers and hockey players, and including ones from outside the school, because I used to coach the Canterbury under-14 team, which included people like Nathan Astle and Lee Jamon and Chris Ken. Well,
really?
I didn't have so much of an association with Chris Kens, but a number of, you know, I think I've coached something like 11 to 13 New Zealand players.
Wow.
In cricket. So people like Jeff Ellett, whose son was the head boy last year, he was in my first 11.
Yep.
And so there's fond memories about that. One of the things I wanted to do was, when I came here, having been through the cricket and the hockey, was to keep our standing in it, our reputation in hockey and cricket, which I think we're successful with. So we've been able to maintain, for instance, in hockey, we've been in the top 8 sports teams, you know, with the Rankin Cup. Out of 60 odd years, we've been in the top 8 something like 53 times. We've won it 20 times or 21 times. So it's a matter of, I think the key thing is about students should look at the reputation of the school. They're here, everyone's involved in maintaining the reputation of the school.
Yeah.
And that, if you use that, and it's important, if you go into life outside and you're working in a particular business or whatever, even if you don't necessarily like it, you've got to do your best, because the more you put in, the more you get out.
Yeah.
Because and you can look at it this way: if you put in a lot in and do a good job, if you want to move on and you need a reference or something like that, at least they can give you a good reference. That's one way of looking at it. It's not the only way, but you also, you know, I put a lot into the school, but I don't think the school owes me anything.
No, it's a service.
Because the school doesn't owe me anything. I've given a lot to the school, but I've also got a lot back in terms of satisfaction and things like that.
I mean, finally, sir, tell us a little bit about your electric scooter. Why? And are they the future?
Yes, definitely. I'm a bit worried about global warming, to put it mildly. I think that, and a lot of young people are worried about it, and that can affect mental health, which is a bit of a worry.
Yeah.
But it is a problem.
Definitely.
The best way to deal with it is to get on and deal with it, and that means you're in more control of what's going to happen. So that's why I've got partly why I've got an electric scooter, because I'm playing a part. I also do a lot of stuff like composting at home.
Oh, right. Brilliant.
Yeah, so I don't buy fertilisers, because I just use the compost that I've got at home. So you can do a lot of things, and it's quite satisfying. I want to put probably solar panels on my house.
Sweet.
Oh, cool.
Yeah, because people say things like, oh, we're going to run out of electricity with the need to charge all these things. Well, the thing is, if you have a solar electricity on your home, you're reducing your draw on the grid, the national grid, which means there's more power for other things like industry. So look at it in a positive way.
Yeah.
It's actually quite exciting. I wish I was you guys, because going forward, I think there's some really exciting things going to happen, and the world will be a better place. I lived in Christchurch when we had all that smog. You could. I remember riding my bike home from university, and you couldn't see more than 30 metres in front because it was so smoky, and we're breathing all that stuff in. But look at it now. After the earthquake, all the chimneys fell over, and now we've got pretty clean air in the winter. So that's got to be an improvement, and better for life. I think there's some exciting things in the future.
Absolutely. Well, Mr. Burtt, it's been a pleasure having you on the podcast.
That's all right.
It's been great to hear from you.
Man full of wisdom, also a very green man as well. I think we've got a lot we can learn from Mr. Burt.
Absolutely.
So once again, we really do appreciate you having you on the podcast. It's been
That's
great.
right. Anytime, I'm available in the future as well.
So this has been actually the first podcast of 2022. I hope you've enjoyed.
Yeah, awesome. We're looking forward to handing over the podcast to our Year 9 boys who are going to be coming on the scene with some fresh takes and some fresh ideas. If you want to check out our socials, we're Christchurch Boys High School Media Team, which is CBHS Media Team on Instagram and Facebook. Thanks for joining us.
Thanks for watching.